From paddocks wide to country towns, voices sharing ups and downs, yarns that paint the rural scene, life out here both tough and keen. Chewing the fat, where stories flow from every place that you might know. Pull up a seat, join in the chat. Across the bush we're chewing the fat. Chewing the fat, where stories flow from every place that you might know. Pull up a seat, join in the chat. Across the bush we're chewing the fat.
Hello and welcome to Chewing the Fat. My name is Neil Butler. This podcast provides edited highlights of the episode that was broadcast live on 94.7 The Pulse on Saturday the 20th of June 2026. My special guest this week is winery owner, former media sales manager, former Fitzroy Under-19s player and old schoolmate Shane Goninon. After I've chatted to Shane, I'll have a chat to our regular correspondent, the Prof. But before we get started though, here's my editorial. Now, I always have a little rant at this stage of the day, and my rant today is to the morons who feel that they have the right to go into Federation Square and make complete and utter idiots of themselves and cause embarrassment to our city around the world. I talk of the people who turn up to watch a soccer game on a TV screen at Federation Square. If I went in there and let go a flare, I would be arrested and put in jail. These people are not only allowed to, it seems as though they are encouraged to. It also attracts far too many for what Federation Square allows, and therefore there are barricades knocked down, security people's lives are put in danger, people get crushed. There was people today who were cornered in part of the establishment and couldn't get out, even if they had have wanted to. If I was running the state, and probably I should be, I would in fact close down Federation Square as a place to watch soccer. If you cannot behave, if your 4-year-olds were behaving like that, you'd say, right up, into your room, you're not allowed to play with that toy anymore. Well, unless these people start to behave sensibly, then we should be shutting down all these live sites for soccer games. The other thing, any event, any activity that encourages the use of Aussie, oi, oi, oi. Have you listened to how the Scots celebrate when they are having a World Cup match? They all get together and sing Flower of Scotland. When Port Adelaide get together, they sing Never Tear Us Apart. The Liverpool supporters sing You'll Never Walk Alone. What do our moron soccer supporters do? Aussie, oi, oi, oi. You are embarrassing. Go home and have a really good, hard look at yourselves. It's great to be able to welcome Shane Goninon. And that is Baby It's You by Promises. You are listening to Chewing the Fat on 94.7 The Pulse. My name's Neil Butler, and on Chewing the Fat, we generally find someone interesting to chat to. This bloke is no exception. He's an old schoolmate. We've obviously kept in touch for a number of years since then, since he and I are both a little well distant from our high school days. Shane Goninon, good morning to you.
Yeah, good morning, Neil. How are you going?
Going okay, thank you. Thanks for joining us on Chewing the Fat. We like to find someone who's a bit interesting, and you've got a pretty interesting story to tell. Let's go back to where it all started. Where were you born?
Well, a long time ago, 1961 in Hobart.
Thanks. You just told everyone how old I am too, because I'm significantly younger than Shane, you understand. In Hobart?
Yep.
So how long did you spend on that island?
Oh, look, Dad got transferred from Hobart when I was about 7 or 8, and got transferred to Melbourne. So then we moved to the Big Smoke.
What sort of work did he do?
He was in insurance, actually. So he was the state manager for Tasmania, which I think was about 3 people, and came over to be the deputy state manager over here with about 43 people, I think it was.
Okay, fair enough. And what part of Melbourne did you guys settle in?
Well, when we first got here, we actually rented a house in Doncaster on Tram Road.
Oh, yeah.
And this is going to ages. Tram Road just down from Shoppingtown Hotel. Shoppingtown, that's a Freudian slip, the Shoppingtown Shopping Centre.
And the Shoppingtown Hotel.
But on that corner there was a dairy with the horses that were pulling the milk carts.
Yeah, for those who are listening in Geelong and surrounds, we're talking about a really major intersection. It's got probably the second or third biggest shopping centre in Melbourne on one corner. It's got a massive sort of office worksy sort of thing on the other corner, and that's the corner you're talking about.
Yeah, there used to be the dairy there, and then they used to have draft horses that was the last time they kind of used them. The draft horses used to take the milk carts around. So that was, we lived down there, and then eventually parents bought a house in East Doncaster, and then we, a couple of years later, another house in another part of East Doncaster. So all my growing up in Melbourne was around, Doncaster, East Doncaster.
And there's been some fine young people come through there, he said, just throwing himself into the conversation momentarily. So we caught up at a school called Donvale High School, no longer there as Donvale. In fact, that campus is closed. But it was an unusual school in so much as, 1966, I think it started in 1991, she was all over Rover.
Yeah, it ended up becoming some kind of special school or something, I think, and then...
Which my children never fail to point out.
Yeah, I think the buildings are still there, but I'm not sure what it is at the moment.
Yeah, I think it's some kind of special education thing. Plus, the gymnasium that was promised all the way through our high school finally turned up just after we left.
Yeah, exactly.
But it was a school that was probably a bit of ahead of itself in those days. For example, and people can probably work this out for themselves, we didn't do Year 7 and Year 9 English or Geography or History. We did a thing called Integrated Studies, which was quite radical in those days.
Yeah, it had some different sort of things, didn't it? And I think there was one of the, later in our time there was a special... more of a class for the arty students and the ones that didn't really want to do maths and all that as well, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it was, and I think we were competing a little bit with a school up the road. I think it was called ERA School or ERA, which was Educational Research Association or something, and they were right out there. I remember going up there to play football one day, and the entire football team for their school didn't want to play, so they climbed on the roof.
Yeah, we played some interesting teams. I can remember... one time we played against I can't remember the name of it. It was like a serious a boys' school that was for troubled youth, I suppose you could say.
Nice.
And I remember we played a game against them, and we had got the absolute crap beaten out of it.
Yeah, I can remember because we had being in the eastern suburbs, there was a lot of private schools as well. So there's lots of kids playing private school footy as well as their weekend footy.
Yeah, the footy clubs around there was quite active. I mean, we played for school, and then as a group of us also played for two teams. We played for East Doncaster played for Donvale on the Saturday, and quite a few of us would front up again on Sunday and play for East Doncaster.
Wow.
And back in those days, the grounds were pretty wet and muddy. You have no skin on your knees and infections on your knees. But it was probably about a dozen of us played for both teams.
And it was a pretty fruitful part of the world for football. Back in the olden days, of course, you were zoned to a club, and the zone, much to my great delight, was Fitzroy in our area. So there was a lot of players who went on to play for Fitzroy who played for Doncaster, East Doncaster, Beverly Hills, Donvale, those clubs.
Yeah, and I think at one stage there, I think East Doncaster was almost kind of Fitzroy fourth, as you know. You had the reserves and the under-19s, and quite a few of the guys ended up training with Fitzroy. A few of them played under-19s and that sort of stuff. So from all those clubs around there, it was quite good.
Well, you look at some of the names that came out of that district: Paul Roos, Gary Pert, Grant Laurie. Chris Smith, who came, top 10 in the Brownlow one year playing for Fitzroy. There was just so many amazing players. Richard Osborne's another one that came out of there. All those players that brought Fitzroy back from the brink in the late 70s through the 1980s when they made the finals a few times. A lot of them came from that part of the world. Also, of course, down here, Colac, Carragulac, those sort of clubs in the Hampden League, which was the other recruiting zone.
Yeah. And a few of them went to the school as well, just not from the clubs. A couple went to Donvale as well.
Yes, they did. Well, of course, Paul Roos, I guess, was our biggest claim to fame there as a footballer. But to just park the modesty for a moment, you wore the maroon and blue on one or two occasions, I believe.
Oh, look, one year there, well, young under-19s, the Fitzroy under-19s had so many injuries, and a couple of us went down, and I think I got a game and a half, and then I did my knee. That was about it.
Yeah, that's no fun. But hey, I tell you what, it's a game and a half more than I played for Fitzroy. So,
I can tell you another funny story. Actually, later in life, when my working days, one of the guys I used to work with, his father, his friend of his was an administrator. I won't say the clubs, but he was an administrator of one of the clubs, and they had a big transfer going on. And part of the deal was that this other club had to give, two players, as well as cash and all that to secure the player. I don't remember who the player was. And found out that because you played football, you're registered, and you were registered with the VFL back in those days.
Yep.
So myself and one of the other guys at work who was also in a similar situation, we got transferred from one VFL club to we got signed up with one VFL club on the morning. That afternoon, we were transferred to another VFL club as part of this deal and automatically delisted.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is Shane Goninon's VFL career right there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Another player that played, I think, one game for Fitzroy will have some interest to the folk in this part of the world. His name was Andrew Merriweather. Do you remember him playing?
I can remember the name, but
Yeah.
I can't really remember. Yeah, I can remember the name.
Yeah, he's got two boys that play football. One's called Cam Guthrie, the other one's called Zach Guthrie. They play for Geelong.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I only found that out 6 or 8 months ago. Yeah.
Okay.
I think I'm right in saying that Guthrie is their mother's maiden name. So, so Andrew played one game for the Mighty Lions. Only 99 short, and they could have come and played for us.
Oh, well. Situations change.
They do. So you left school, I would have said, very late 1970s. What happened then?
Yeah, I left in 79 and decided after that better try and do some kind of work. And over that period, Dad got transferred again to Sydney, the same company. So they moved up to Sydney. I stayed here a little bit longer and I went up to Sydney, and all of a sudden, luckily they rented a place at Mona Vale Beach. So we basically lived on the beach, which was just absolutely amazing up in that part of northern Sydney. And then decided better get a job, and applied. There was a job came along in a little paper, and it was for an advertising trainee. And so I applied for it, and bugger me, I got it. It's with a company called George Patterson.
Okay, that's a fairly well-known name.
George, and it became George Patterson Bates. It was at that stage, it was the largest advertising agency in the country. And we got to be a advertising trainee, which essentially for the first 12 months or 14 months, you basically means you were a mail boy. There was 12 of us, and all you did, going back to that time, this is pre-computers. They had a computer, but the computer room took up the whole back of the second floor.
Yes.
And all we did was, run internal mail, do the mail, carried paper, and it was quite funny that it was like a 5-story building in George Street in Sydney, and the young secretaries, if you can call them that in those days, receptionists, they used to love ringing up, ask the guy in head of dispatch, that's what we're in dispatch, can you send the boy up to take a letter from my office to Mary's office? Mary's office is probably next door, but they just loved us 18-year-old, 19-year-olds, to rule us around. So it was it's quite funny. But the other jobs you got too is you're always driving people somewhere. You go down, they give you a car, and at that stage they just were looking after Holden, and a new car came out then. The first, I think it was called a Commodore.
Oh, I've heard of those.
Yeah, so we got to just grab these Commodores, and you drive the directors around, you drive people around, go pick stuff up. But you also got to drive, the talent round for they were taking to commercial shoots and all that sort of stuff. So it was a very varied job. It had some great stories there, and
some of which would be good for radio. The others probably not so much.
A couple of good ones. Yes, the chairman of the company, he was a gentleman called Sir Keith Cousins, and back in those, this was real mad and stuff. Back in those days, he had a chauffeur and a Cadillac and chomped on big Cuban cigars.
Medical authorities warn that smoking is a health hazard.
one of the best jobs you could get is you have to go, they'd say, I need a boy to go get the chairman's cigars. And basically you would grab a Commodore, drive down past Wollongong from Sydney.
Wow.
And go to this little tobacconist there to pick up his Cuban cigars. He probably came back with $1,000 worth of Cuban cigars in the back of the Commodore. And, of course, we used to drive them like we stole them as well.
Yes.
They're all V8s and all that stuff. So, but you got that job. That was one of the good ones because there's your whole day. It was just driving around in someone else's car. It was great.
Well, just to put that in context for those who are listening in the sort of Geelong region, that going Sydney to Wollongong is pretty much like going Melbourne to Geelong or slightly further just to get a box of cigars. And, of course, we don't condone smoking in any way, shape or form.
Bit further. Driving down around the coast, yeah.
Yeah, nice. So that career was pretty much what saw you through until, a few years ago. You must have been involved in some pretty significant conversations with some significant people.
Yeah, look, after that, I believe it or not, I came back to Melbourne and then I got a job as a media trainee, basically, with a company called Mitchell & Partners with a gentleman called Harold Mitchell.
Yeah, he's pretty well known.
Pretty well known. He passed away recently, unfortunately. And basically I was there for 4 or 5 years, just, learning the ropes of being in media. And so what media was in the advertising industry, we were the ones that would plan the campaigns, the media campaigns. And back in those days, it was a lot simpler because you planned the television campaign, newspapers, radio and magazines and a bit of outdoor. That was it. And so basically you'd plan the media campaign, how many spots you'd have on TV, what shows you would be in and what magazines or newspapers you'd use, all that sort of stuff. And you'd spend the money. So you're the ones that ring up, Channel 7, 9 or 10 and say, I want to buy, 20 spots at this rate and negotiate and all that stuff. So that's essentially how it started. Then over the journey there, went to a number of companies, even spent 7 years in Adelaide doing the same thing, just eventually moving up the tree in various companies. But it was, look, back in those days, a young person working in the media, I mean, you're dealing with all the television networks and radio. I mean, it was kind of dealing with Australia's Hollywood, if you know what I mean? And they're always having functions and they're always asking you along. So you got to go to some pretty, anything that came to town, they'd give you tickets to it, any event and concert or anything like that. So I've been very lucky to go to a lot of events and music and concerts and functions along those lines. But yeah, it's met a couple of interesting people. There's one we've got a picture in the cellar door here of it's myself with it's a funny story behind it. It's myself with a picture of Tony Blair, the ex-British Prime Minister. And we're just in front of an Australian and a British flag, and it was literally just he was out here after he was Prime Minister talking to it. And it's funny, the gentleman I went with, just calling him Ben, Tony Blair lived in Australia for a while, and he actually went as a young person, and he actually lived with Ben's parents.
Oh, okay.
So when everyone's queued up, they queued you up. You got free tickets. We got free tickets, and they queued you up to have a photo. It was literally stand next to him, shake his hand, and get out of the way. And I was with Ben and walked up, and Ben introduced himself, and he hadn't seen Ben since he was like 5 or 6. And all of a sudden, how's your dad? Yeah, it was great. Blah blah blah. And of course, the people are trying to get everyone to move on. Ben introduced me as well. So he's trying to get everyone to move on, and Blair's going, I'll move them on when I want to move them on. And of course, everyone else had their 10, 15 seconds. We were for about 15 minutes, the two of us. That was fascinating.
Yeah, nice.
So I got to meet him, but, it was very fleeting, but that sort of stuff.
I'm wondering when he gets interviewed on shows like Parkinson and that sort of thing, whether he talks about the day he met you.
Probably not.
No, fair enough.
Be a safe bet.
Yeah, no. But I guess it would have been a pretty, you've talked about all the good stuff that came out. It would have been a pretty solid kind of role, though, in terms of spending someone else's money. And we're not talking taking out a newspaper ad in the Geelong Addy. We're talking about something that, serious dollars, I would have thought.
Oh, yeah, look, back in those days, you had different clients, all had different budgets. And, I mean, those early days, someone had a budget of a couple of $100,000 was considered quite big. I mean, it doesn't matter now. I've been out of the industry for quite a few months, but I ended up my final position was looking after all the Bunnings advertising, and
so it's your fault.
It is my fault. Yes. and worked on them for 16 years.
Wow.
And basically, I think when I left there, if the whole media, advertising, marketing budget, if we had change out of 100 million, it wasn't much.
Wow. Nice.
So you're talking, for some of these big companies, they do spend a lot of money, but
Yeah.
a lot harder to spend it now with all the different, the media fragmentation and everything. But,
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a bit harder to work out what a click costs.
Exactly.
Sorry, I didn't mean to go all trendy on you and use,
Yeah.
modern words
All the
like click.
new terminology.
That's it. So I would have thought that when you finished doing that, you would just be looking for a rest. So you head to the bush.
Yeah, well, one thing about that industry, it's definitely even more so now, it's a young person's industry. And, 13 years ago now, 10, 11, 12 years ago, I was 55. I was the oldest in the company Australia-wide. I was the longest serving, 16 years. Probably not, paid pretty well. And and everyone around me in the era that I was coming, not everyone, but a lot of the people in my generation were various companies are all getting tapped on the shoulder and, you've been here a long time type of thing, and you've got to make way for the younger generation. And I thought I'd get on the front foot, so I decided to look for a bit of something else. We wanted to move out of the city, and it took us a couple of years, but then we found this place where we are now. It's a micro winery that we run and live at, and so we bought that place. I still continued to work in the industry for 3 years, and I was kept commuting actually, and down there, and then finally decided. It was actually quite funny. My plan was to pull the pin the end of that year, and then one of the senior managers over lunch said, "Shane, what's your plans now that you've got this property?" And I thought straight away, okay, somewhere there's a shiny suited accountant in this company that's looked at the figures and said, he's getting old, we'll probably get rid of him. So I actually said, I want to continue for 5 years. And they said, yep, you can do that. Went back to them a couple of weeks later and said, if you throw something at me, I might have a look at it. And they did, and so I accepted it.
Nice.
But then said, can you stay for 6 months until we find someone to replace you? So that's the way it went.
So you're up in the Grampians region making a bit of wine?
Yeah, look, we're just out 20 minutes east of Ararat, at the start of the Grampians wine region. A little 80-acre property with 10 acres of vines. We make our wine here. Jane, my wife, is the winemaker. She studied at Roseworthy years ago when we lived in Adelaide, which was the wine university in Adelaide at those times.
Yep.
Yeah, so we had a bit of fun over the 10. We're coming into our 13th year, sorry. And make wine. We've got a little bit of accommodation on the property, but it's certainly a totally different lifestyle. And you move to a country town here, and the first question they ask is, so you're going to join the CFA? And I said, well, I wasn't planning to, but so you get roped into that. Well, you got to. And a couple of years ago, I wasn't quick enough. No, actually, I couldn't go to a meeting, and they didn't call me up and said I'm bloody captain. So.
And I mean, we laugh about the volunteerism, but it's such an important thing in a country town. And of course, would have been 2 years ago, the fires got awful close to your place, and you were out there holding the hose trying to put the fire out someone else's house.
Yeah, we had, it was called basically it was Mount Cole, and it was called the Bay and Dean Mount Cole fire. And all the mountain range behind us, which runs all the way down to Beaufort, basically, for 10 days, the whole mountain range was on fire, and then it started about 6 k's from here, but on the last couple of days, it had gone right around the mountain, and it was coming back to us, and the fire got into our land, in the property, and it was basically the 15 choppers stopped it on the top of the hill, and but most of the locals here were on fire trucks for 10 days, 14 days, and just going from, chasing burning stuff around everywhere, but you got to do it. Someone's got to do it. And the interesting thing is now that you go to a lot of these fires, and there's a lot of, people older than you and me that are on and off these trucks. And interestingly enough, prior to this, our truck that we had then was 34 years old, and we still had a couple of old guys who could get in it and drive it. We wouldn't let them. They're in their late 70s, 80s, and we wouldn't let them get out, but they were very professional and they experienced in driving the truck. And all of a sudden, we finally got a newer truck. It's still 10 years old, but these trucks are so damn big. We've got half a dozen old guys who used to get on the truck. They can't get on it now.
Wow.
Can't climb on it.
Wow. It'll happen to you and me one of these days, I guess.
Well, I'll tell you what, if you're climbing on this truck and you miss the handrail, you look stupid when you pick yourself up the ground. They're pretty tall.
Well, you know when you're getting old, because when I first visited, when I first lived in a country town, they didn't ask me if I wanted to join the CFA. They asked me if I could play centre half forward. So you're getting old when they don't ask you about the footy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, look, there's still footy. The country footy's played in the town. So we're talking to someone the other day, and they said a lot of it, not just around here, but a lot of the towns can't.
Yeah.
Put footy teams together anymore.
Yeah, and you hear of the mergers and that. As soon as you hear of the merger, you just know that the town's in strife. Yeah, so it's sad. But fortunately, there's a podcast, he said, shamelessly plugging the A to Z of regional footy clubs podcast. Have a look at that some stage.
Okay.
I'm talking to 26, funnily enough, 26 clubs in the podcast.
Okay. Oh, good.
Available in all good podcast stores and probably one or two dodgy ones. Shane Goninon, we better let you go and pick some grapes or sell some wine or do whatever you do. We're probably not allowed to say Mountainside Wines on the radio because that would be a plug, so I won't say Mountainside Wines. But if people come up and say g'day and they know that they tell you that they heard about you on Chewing the Fat, I'm sure you'll give them a warm greeting.
Absolutely, thank you.
Excellent. Shane Goninon, we are going to go out with a song which is familiar to you. Shane is a bit of a fan of the work of Artie Fischel and the Intelligence, and Artie actually wrote a song called Now We Can All Get Some Sleep, and it talks about someone called Shane. And in fact, this is the Shane that song relates to. So good on you and congratulations on being immortalised in song by Artie Fischel and the Intelligence, who are here to sing Now We Can All Get Some Sleep. Thanks, Shane. And that was Shane Goninon. Finally, it's time for this week's conversation with the Prof. We most certainly are bound for South Australia. It's been a long time since I had a good chat with this fella. His name is the Prof. Hello, Prof.
Hello, Neil. How are you today?
Good, thanks, mate. It's been last time I spoke to you. I reckon you were not long after your heart attack. I trust that you are well and fighting fit.
Yes, getting better by the day, and I thank you for your inquiry. And certainly, I am feeling much better and. But adhering to everything that all the medicos are asking me to do. So if I don't do that, it's my own fault.
Absolutely, and we are very pleased to hear that you are on the mend because, well, we like having you as part of this show. Now, there's a couple of things we want to have a chat about, and I guess the biggest thing that's going on in the world outside of the occasional war here and there is a war being played out on what they like to call football grounds, what I like to call soccer grounds, the World Cup.
Well, I just reckon, Neil, that this 6 or 8 weeks, which the World Cup will be played in, and it's being played in Canada, America, and Mexico this year, that it is I think, and we just spoke about it a second ago, that it is really the Olympic Games of soccer.
Yep.
It's whether we like it or not, and I'm very much an AFL person. I know you are. I love sport generally, but I think anybody that appreciates elite sport at its very best has got to be interested in the World Cup, which is going on at the moment. And for the people that don't know, Neil, there's 48 teams that are going to participate in America and Mexico in the next 6 or 8 weeks. 48 teams from representing each country. And Australia, is well done to that, the Socceroos, because, population-wise, we're always a little bit behind the other countries. But they're going to be fighting for, what is probably the highest award you can possibly get in team sport, and I think that is the World Cup. And I'll certainly be watching some of the games, and you might, and I know a lot of your listeners will, particularly our our overseas people that have come in from overseas, where the game of soccer was their national game.
Yeah, and I think there'll be people throwing things at the radio going, what does he mean? It's the Olympic Games of soccer. There's Olympic Games has soccer. Yes, but they're all under 23s. So in that situation, it's almost like a development squad competition at the Olympics. This is, the very best team that any country can put on the park.
That's correct. And look, I've had a look at some of the results, and look, there's 12 groups represented, and there's 4 teams in each of those groups, which, as I said, represents 48 different countries. You would think that the powerhouse countries from around the world, like your teams from South America, which includes Brazil, those sort of countries, I think the host nation USA is going to be very, very hard to beat. And, sadly, overnight, they were far too good for our Socceroos, Neil. After the Socceroos had showed some really good form against, you have to put me right here, Turkey now, I think it's called, isn't it?
Yeah, I think Turkey. Turkey. Yeah, we know who we're talking about. Yeah, and I think one of the interesting developments in this particular World Cup is in the past there's only been 32 teams who have been in it. So 32 teams play against, the top 2 go through, it becomes 16, then 8, then 4, then 2, then a winner. Right. This time around with 48, there's obviously going to be more games and there's going to be more knockouts, I would have thought, starting earlier. I think I'm right in saying that normally the knockout rounds only have 16 sides in it, but there'll be 32 sides when they get to knockout stage.
Well, I just wonder whether it's the same reason why the AFL now are making it a top 10. I would have thought it could all about having extra games and extra people going through the turnstiles.
What, do you think there's an element of money in this, Prof? Sorry, let me just get a soft cloth and I'll wipe up the cynicism that's falling apart here at the moment.
But anyway, look, I think it's going to be a fantastic World Cup. Some of the countries that have done well today, as I said, are those South American countries like Argentina, Uruguay. What have we got here? We got Brazil, obviously, and Mexico have played 2-1-2, and they're all countries in that same region, Latin America. And let's just hope that Australia can either win or draw the final game in their pool or group, because if they were able to do that, Neil, I'm sure that they can go through to the next stage, which will be the knockout stage. And I think, and as I said a minute ago, and I'm sure you'll agree and some of your listeners will agree, that, I reckon Australia over many, many years and over many different codes punch above our weight.
Yes.
Because, we haven't got, compared to other countries like European countries and South American countries, our population is very, very small in relation to them. And I think for us to be, matching it with the big boys in this particular code, I think is a credit to our people that run the game.
And arguably, we would say that soccer is our 3rd or 4th most populous football code, if you like. So it's not as though it's the predominant one like it would be in, say, a Brazil or a Germany.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, though, that, we are very much a multicultural country, and as we both agree that there are so many people from so many different countries that reside in our wonderful country now, and as I said, they have brought their game with them, and I think certainly in the last 2 decades, Australia has been put on the world map by our lady soccer players, and those obviously our own Socceroos. I think for the last 3 World Cups, Australia has been represented, where previous decades, Australia were never in contention relative to that particular code. But I'm looking forward to see how Australia goes against Paraguay in the next probably 3 or 4 days. I think, as I said, if we could win that or at least draw that, I think you're going to find Australia will go then through to the next round. But once that happens, they come up against some powerhouses like Germany and Sweden, and the South American countries, and the European countries too are all very strong. And we can't forget England, who had a fantastic first win, which was, I think, 4-2. And I don't think they're in a very tough draw, which will certainly see them through to the next round and possibly through, to the very end of the competition.
But they always find a way, don't they, to lose somewhere along. It's a bit like Collingwood in the 70s and 80s when they couldn't win a grand final. Now, before we wind up, we've had some sad news from your state, and as a South Australian, I thought it would be important to at least acknowledge the motor accident that involved Tony Modra and how that would be impacting on South Australians, particularly South Australian football fans.
Well, I think first of all, I've been watching the messages coming through relative to Tony in the last few days, and look, whichever team you barrack for, I think within the AFL family, and particularly the two South Australian sides, it doesn't matter because everybody is concerned with what's happened to Tony in the last few days. Just a very, very freak accident where he was driving a cattle truck and a branch fell from a tree and went through the front windscreen through into Tony. And he I think in the first few hours of that accident, Neil, was very, very sick boy. I think there's been a couple of people, been acknowledged since then that probably saved Tony's life. But Tony Modra, and I'm a football lover and so are you, Tony Modra was an entertainer more than anything. And I think you'll find that whether you're a supporter of Collingwood or the Brisbane Lions or Carlton or the Adelaide Crows themselves, Tony was a guy that kicked a lot of goals, brought people through the turnstiles, and was a very fair player. But his expertise and that was of high marking was something that thrilled everybody that went to those games. And that's the reason why there's so many people coming forward now and wishing him the best and hope he does get better.
I think the ultimate test that Rob and I like to use when we're talking about footballers, particularly those who play for opposition sides, is would you like to sit down and have a beer with them? And I would have thought that sitting down and having a beer with Mods would have been a good thing to do, and hope we get a chance that he'll be able to do that again going forward.
I'm sure that will be the case. I think Tony has got a little bit of a tough road in front of him, but it just goes to show, and I found that myself personally, that we to some degree we all live on a knife edge.
Yep.
What happened today could be totally different. What's the case tomorrow? It's important to make sure we're all safe and look after ourselves and look after our friends, because it's really important that as a society we're doing those sort of things. But yeah, I'm pleased you brought that up, Neil, because Tony Modra is one person that I'd pay big money to go and watch football. Adam Gilchrist is a wonderful cricketer that I'd pay big money to go and watch. Andrew McLeod from the Adelaide Crows. But Tony Modra is something really special. And I really feel sad for Tony in one respect, that he was never ever a part of the two premierships that Adelaide won back in the late 1990s.
Yeah. Well, Prof, we're running out of time, so great tribute. Thank you for spending some time with us today, particularly talking through the situation with Tony, and we all have him in our thoughts. I'm looking forward to the fact that this time next week, I'm going to get a chance to chat to you again. I'll look forward to talking to you next Saturday morning at, 11:15 your time, 12 hours.
Certainly look forward to that, Neil.
Good on you, Prof. Thanks, mate. There he is, the Prof from Mount Gambier.
And there's the Prof. He'll be back on air next week as well. That's all we've got time for in this episode. Chewing the Fat is presented live on 94.7 The Pulse every Saturday morning at 11 o'clock with either me or my on-air partner Rob Cameron in the host's chair. I look forward to your company next time.
From paddocks wide to country towns, voices sharing ups and downs, yarns that paint the rural scene, life out here both tough and keen. Chewing the fat, where stories flow from every place that you might know. Pull up a seat, join in the chat. Across the bush we're chewing the fat. Chewing the fat, where stories flow from every place that you might know. Pull up a seat, join in the chat.